Welcome to the Veterinary Marketing Podcast, where it's all about how to attract, engage, and retain clients using digital marketing at your veterinary hospital. My name is Brandon Brashears. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Today's episode is number 238, and in today's episode, we have a special guest. It's Dr. Caitlin Dewilde. I'm very excited about this episode because I think it is full of really good value. She also just wrote a book that is out now. If you're listening to this, it is out. So you should absolutely check that book out too. Before we begin, I want to make a few suggestions if you're open to them. First, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you could do me a huge favor, if you're listening in Spotify right now, just take a second to give me an honest review. I'd really appreciate that. They just recently released reviews there, so that would be really helpful. The other thing that I'd suggest doing is heading on over to the Facebook group, the Veterinary Marketing Nerds. If you need any help, it's a great place to get additional help, resources, and ask questions. There's a lot of really smart people in there, so be sure to head on over that way. All right, so today's episode, number 238, we have Dr. Caitlin Dewilde, the social DVM. If you haven't heard of her, you've probably been under a rock somewhere. She is a really skilled digital marketer, and I'm excited to get and share with you insights regarding social media marketing. We really dive into some very helpful topics. The things that I really enjoy talking about are how do we track ROI? That's really important. What's working now? What should you be doing when it comes to video, photo, written content, stuff like that? It's just full of really practical tips, and I think that you're going to really enjoy this episode. So without further ado, here is my episode with Dr. Caitlin Dewilde. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so this week we have Dr. Caitlin Dewilde on the podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest. Caitlin, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Honored to be here.
I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but real quick, just a quick info on how you got started in the marketing world. Obviously, you're Dr. Caitlin Dewilde, so you know how to do cool stuff and marketing.
And it's debatable which part of that is cooler. I guess it depends on the day. So I'm a veterinarian in St. Louis. I own a company called the Social DVM, which I started back in 2013, mostly because I got really, really mad about all of my clients looking stuff up in the exam room. And my initial reaction was to be mad about it. And then I realized, well, we're not giving them anything better. And that's how they want to find their info is online. So started social and got really nerdy about it, and the rest is history.
Very cool. So today I really wanted to talk to you about social because I feel like I am out of the loop in social, right? Just focused so hard on ads and things. And when it comes to social, what do you think are the biggest, right now, bang for the buck when it comes to social media marketing in general?
Oh, man, good question. This is something that changes, right? As you well know from your history. What I tell you today might be totally different in 2 months or 3 months. But I think the biggest thing is to have a multimedia approach, right? Multimodal if you're a veterinary nerd. So I think if you're sinking all of your eggs in one basket, that's a bad idea.
Definitely.
I think it's important to start branching out a little bit. It doesn't mean that every practice needs to be on TikTok, but I think it's worth trial and error on something. So again, if you're not putting all your eggs in the Facebook basket, maybe you've got a little bit more freedom or time or energy for Instagram or for Facebook. And then the last thing, I think, one thing that I've really spent the last year working with our clients and even at my own clinic that have been really valuable from a social standpoint is to think about the clients that you, not only that you want, but think about the ones you already have that are awesome, right? Like not just the top spenders, but the ones that are nice to work with. Their pets are up to date on the things that you recommend. They're compliant on their medications, and they're like fun, and they make you happy to do your job. How do we find more of those people, right? Well, one of the best things I think that we can be doing is asking them, right? What do you guys like to see on social? What channels are you using? Because I would rather have more of the awesome clients that I have, and there's not that many, right? I'd rather have more people that are just like them than I would with any algorithm of trying to target like, okay, here's the ideal client is this age, this neighborhood, that kind of thing. So those are probably my big three. And that last one has been really huge. Like it surprises me because we've asked at our clinic, and then several of my clients that I work with, we have done this kind of same experiment with them and their top clients. The answers are different at every practice.
Definitely. That makes sense. So you mentioned TikTok, and I think that's really interesting. I think that the landscape of apps and social apps is completely different than it was, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, right? Where now it seems like that apps in general and social channels are all really, really gated as far as what can actually emerge. There was like a time when there was, every social app that popped up was like, Vine came out, and then Telescope or Periscope.
Periscope, yeah.
Periscope and like Snapchat and all of these emerging. There was like this time where within a year, like 10 social apps came out. They were all really fragmented. But I think that's really stopped because of the app platforms in general are so hard to break through. Mm-hmm. But like obviously TikTok has emerged as just as big as anything, probably more so than other platforms. So when you said, you don't have to get into TikTok, I feel like if something can break through and hit the level of mainstream, that you kind of do have to jump on there. I am not creating content on there, but yeah, like I spend probably more time on that app than others as far as social apps, just because it's a lot more entertaining. What do you think about that in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the content that you personally watch or like your top clients watch, so I watch a lot of TikTok content on Facebook or Instagram, right? And you can tell because you can see that little icon, like the little symbol, right? Sure. So I think when you think about, okay, this is the kind of content that's entertaining, what if I can still create it? Is it that much more work to put it on multiple platforms? Depends, right? If you're savvy enough or willing to spend for something like Buffer or Hootsuite or whatever, it's definitely not the case. But what I find is that a lot of people assume that the content that they put on there has to be so scripted and it's such a big deal to do, and they're still 10 years in, people do not want to create video content. Mm-hmm. And so if your barrier right now is you're not creating video content for Facebook and Instagram, then you really don't have any business doing TikTok because you're not going to do a good job, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing video content, then yes, you should be, you should be doing it. So that's kind of always my like big practical thing of saying like, okay, not everybody needs to be on it. That's true, because if you don't have the intent of creating video content, then you don't need to be on it, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a good ROI for you. But if you're okay with doing it and you have the time, there's no reason you can't put it on everything. And that's a lesson I think a lot of people miss. They're like, oh, I don't want to get into one more thing. It's like a click of a button. It's not that much more effort to be on multiple platforms.
Totally.
So that's my 2 cents. But that said, I also still work in a clinic, and there are days that I go in and I'm like, oh, okay, today I'm going to do this reel on this, and I'm going to do a video on this, and I'm going to get all these pictures. And then I walk out the door like completely dead to the world, and I've taken no photos or videos the entire day because it's just crazy.
Yeah, so, it definitely takes effort.
Yeah, if you're not making that a priority, or if you don't have somebody on your team to do it, then I get it. And then that's when I would say, well, it's maybe not worth it. I also think that, again, and you and I have spoken about this a lot, but you have to know why you're using social to begin with. Mm-hmm. And for the clinics that are out there that are, they're just using it to get new clients, I don't think that's very many clinics anymore. Most are not, right?
Yeah.
Or they're trying to bond to the clients that they have so they don't lose them to the big corporate one down the street. Okay, mm-hmm. That's a fair thing. Or more importantly, a lot of them are trying to hire. And if you're trying to hire somebody that's under 30, you should probably be on TikTok and like showing off what it's like to work at your clinic.
That's really good.
So the content maybe then is different. Maybe you're not like, I think a lot of people feel this huge pressure to show off this like polished content for pet owners. But I think if you're just trying to be like, hey, here's what it's like to work here, Like, that's a little bit different,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. And as you mentioned that, I don't know why I don't think about that more often, but I know 3 practices that hired vets specifically because they had a good online social presence. And they specifically said, like, I went and stalked your social, and they liked that they were creating social on all the platforms, especially TikTok and Instagram. And so that makes total sense. And also what you said about all of the really engaging videos that are on Instagram and Facebook, at least for Reels, they're all pulled from TikTok. So it seems like TikTok is the main hub that's pulling all of that really engaging content, probably starting a lot of the trends. It's really easy to create videos there. You can use their audio like really easily and then put it on the other platforms. I see that a lot with YouTube Shorts as well, which is like a not very created on platform. But it's really interesting. There's actually 30 billion daily Shorts views like per day, which is insane. So like it's actually almost as popular as TikTok.
That's crazy. I don't even think about that. Like I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody call it a YouTube short. So maybe
that's
I don't know what it
that's
is.
Actually a product on their app now that's competing directly with TikTok that they call them YouTube Shorts that are the same as Reels. So it's Google's thing that like nobody's using them. I mean, it's hard to use them for anything local just because YouTube is a much larger platform, right? And not definitely, I would say that's like the least important platform for most practices from a social standpoint. But it's just really, really, really interesting. So, and I'd be interested to see what you think about Facebook still, because, when it comes to Facebook, at least for organic, the reach is so low, generally speaking, and it might be changing just because they're trying to bring people back into the platform, especially with video. So what are you seeing right now with Facebook organic? And like, it's really interesting. I've seen group numbers go way down, which it seems like groups were being promoted for a long time. It doesn't seem like that's happening as much, but what are your thoughts on Facebook?
Yeah, I have such a love-hate relationship with Facebook, and to be 100% honest, I frequently yell at it, and I'm like, why did I build a business based on this some days, right? Like, totally. But on the other hand, I still think it's the most widely accepted by our clientele in general. But yeah, the reach, it's so frustrating. I had this conversation with actually a friend yesterday, and she was like, why is the engagement so low? And I was like, she's like, we used to be able to post this and get 200 likes on it. And I was like, you're going to have to set your expectations way, way down. Success now is not 100 likes. It is like 25, right? For a local clinic, which sucks. But if you're not spending money, that's what it's going to be. Like, it's just where it is. I do think groups, I mean, I know very few clinics that are using groups, but I think it's, maybe a tiny bit better, but it's nothing like what it was even 6 months ago. So I feel like in general, it's all kind of draining, but what I see is the TikTok-esque content on Facebook is doing very well. So stories and videos, I think, are going way better. So we've been doing a lot more stories for the clinic, and they're getting way more reach. But that's not always what I want, right? Like, it's just sharing like the cute photos. I'm not sure what it's accomplishing, right? At least with posts, I could add call to actions, links that were very obvious. And I don't feel like I'm getting the same uptick on people taking action from the stories and reels. But I do think that they're getting seen by more people.
Definitely. So I think there's ways to get more engagement and actually do direct response with stories, but it's so time intensive, right? Like if you put something that you're just asking for response and people respond to it, you can go through and actually message them individually. I've done that for a few clients on ad stuff where people responded, and so then we've sent like promo codes or special offers, but it just takes hours to do it, so it like kind of defeats the purpose of it. But
no clinic's got time for that now. Absolutely it's so sadly, probably for a while.
Definitely. So When it comes to content on Facebook and Instagram, are you suggesting, like, generally speaking, an Instagram first content strategy where they just connect stuff and push it to Facebook? Or are you still suggesting people do individual, both, unique content for Facebook and then unique content for Instagram?
I would love to say you should do unique content for both. If this were like a regular marketing podcast that was not in the veterinary industry, I'd be like, yeah, obviously you should do.
Yeah.
But I am a total realist that it's just not going to happen. So I'm thrilled if you create any content, and I think you should put it everywhere you can. So sure. I think get it out there as much as you can. So
I'm totally on board with just hook it up and produce from Instagram, pushing towards Facebook. And I think Facebook is a lesser platform, in my opinion, these days. Which I don't know if you agree with that. Yeah. But I think Facebook is a sinking ship, especially because their ad platform, they just have not addressed any of these major problems. And
it's so annoying.
When I saw that they've not done anything to give like clear idea on how to do tracking with iOS 14 and stuff, it just seems like they're abandoning that and going into the metaverse.
Probably. Like it's so it's becoming increasingly not user-friendly, right? For you to do anything other than post. And even just the posting, like I get people all the time that are like, what the hell with this Meta Business Manager, Business Suite? They can't, like, and now they're like toggling in and out of profiles and things like that. I feel like they're just doing things to make it annoying. So I definitely don't disagree. In fact, like most of the content that we do like is out like from, like you said, third party and pushed in, or from Instagram first. Now, I will say I do still have some clients in rural areas and they are killing it on Facebook, and Instagram does nothing. But I don't think that's the majority of practices. It's certainly not the same true for my practice. Is Instagram way better, and I feel like way more relationship building, because we are connecting, especially with people that have, Instagram accounts for their own pets and things like that. I feel like we've made some serious, like, long-term relationships because of Instagram, and I cannot say that for Facebook at all.
That's super cool. And that's interesting you say that, because I moved out to northern Idaho in a rural space. In the practice that I go to, there's only one, and they don't have a website. They just have a Facebook page, and they're booked out. They don't have any openings for new clients now, and they just only have to focus on that. So that's definitely a big thing. When you talk to practices and you're helping them with their social strategy, do you really focus on just creating content, or do you think there's any place for kind of like curated content that people are having created for them? Do you think there's anything like to that at all? I think that's
like for them getting someone to create their own content, or like just finding any curated content?
Just any curated content in general. Like, is there any way to outsource this, or I guess what's the best way to outsource this in your opinion? Because I'd like to
I think outsourcing is a word that used to be a bad word in our little niche of the world. And truthfully, I always tell people, like, I work with a lot of clinics, but I always tell them, like, content is definitely better. All of your social will be better if you have someone there that can create it and who gives a shit. The reality, again, is that just doesn't happen. Like, and that's not necessarily a new thing in the last few years, but it's certainly gotten worse, right? They don't have the time. Maybe they don't have somebody that knows how or wants to do it. So I think curating and outsourcing is a viable solution, but I think if you're not also mixing in your own, then it's going to fall flat. Like, it's cool when it's like, okay, here's this great video that we found of this other vet dancing around on TikTok explaining heartworm disease. I would totally share that. I have no problem sharing that. But I think that needs to be a part of the mix where it's like, here are the real people who are actually caring for your pets. Because I wouldn't want to do that, right? Like, why would I follow my kids' school or my kids' preschool or whatever? Why would I follow them only to see all the other helpful preschool age content, but never see pictures of the people or the kids that are actually there, never get information directly from them? I would not follow it. I can find that on my own, right?
Yeah.
So I think there has to be a mix. So I'm a big believer in now, like, you need to plan for some budget of outsourcing, whether that's getting your videos edited so they actually get done. Like, that's fine. You got the content. It still counts, but have somebody fine tune it, right? Like, and polish it up. Like, I think that has to be a part of the strategy for a successful strategy in this day.
Definitely. I think it makes sense. I don't think there's really any reason, with the exception of if you have reception staff or somebody that you're going to pay to train to like learn how to do video editing, because it's tough just to expect them to show up and edit videos. Right. So like train them how to edit videos, or just there's tons of video editing people out there that can do a great job for you. And that makes total sense. The content, I think, especially if people pay for services that are just creating content for them, that there's not any personal pictures of people in the practice. If it's just all stock stuff, I think that's actually more detrimental than actually not posting. Yeah. But I don't know what you think about that. If that
100%. Well, first of all, the stock stuff is so terrible, right? Like, terrible. Kelsey Beth Carpenter has like a wonderful series on her social media about
the stethoscope being put in all these weird places. Right.
It's always bad. And I'm like, honestly, I work with so many clients, and that's like that from industry, that's like my main function is to be like, no vet would ever touch that stethoscope, right? And they would certainly not put it there. But just knowing, and they all wear like weird scrubs too. Like, I'm like, no, and they all have gloves. No, I mean, it seems weird to say that, like, if you're looking at a photo, but I'm always like, no vets and techs wear gloves when touching a pet unless it has, like, ringworm or you're in surgery. Like, that's it. And it's also, like, very cold and sterile then, right? But, like, every stock photo, it's either wearing gloves, bad scrubs, or the stethoscope is either wrong spot or just a terrible, like, cheapo stethoscope. Yeah. So, anyway, but follow Kelsey Beth's thing, because she has, like, bad stock photos of vet med. Like, it's a trend, and it's so funny. Like, they're hilarious. But, so, yeah, I agree, because those photos are not going to do anything for that relationship. And that's why we're doing it, no matter what relationship you're trying to build. If that's new client, current client, potential hires, you got to have some warm fuzzies there, and it's not going to come from stock at all.
Definitely makes sense. So when it comes to marketing, and you mentioned return on marketing, I think that's the most difficult conversation that I have with ad clients that I work with, which is really interesting because we're actually like driving new clients in the door. When it comes to creating campaigns or creating social content that's going to drive a return, what do you think the most important things are to actually be able to calculate that? And I think you have a better understanding of this because you work in a practice and you've worked in practices, right? Like, I can't get any data from practices. Like 99.9%. There's actually one practice that I know how many clients we're generating, like down to a science. The other ones we have an idea, but it's not exact. So when we talk about return, I think this is probably one of the most difficult questions to answer. But how do you help people understand what their return is when it comes to social?
Well, first I tell them that they're going to need to block off like an hour and have a beer while we're having this conversation, because it's not a fun conversation, because it's hard to explain, right? It's totally trackable. It's 100% trackable, but it requires a lot of effort on both ends. And most of the people, if they're working with me, they're working with you. The reason they're doing that is because they don't have time on their end to be doing it.
Sure.
So now when I tell them, okay, now I need this, because none of these softwares are, like the practice management softwares, are easy for us to get into the back end to, right, remotely. I will say, if I'm telling somebody they really want to know, they really want to calculate their ROI, the easiest thing to do is from a new client perspective. So that's the topic. But then you have to say, okay, that means your team, and not just you, because that's the other thing. You got to get everybody in the clinic on board. You have to get everybody to, number one, ask or make sure they filled out that blank on the new client registration form. How did you hear about us today? Mm-hmm. You have to make sure people answer. Yep. And then you actually have to fill that out in the practice management system. Every one of them, even like Avamark, Cornerstone, all those, they have a referral source in your client information screen. Yep. Even at my hospital, I like this was such a thing. Like I feel like my front desk hated me for many reasons. No, I'm joking. They hated me because I wanted to know. I was like, I want to prove that this can be done.
Yeah.
And so the first step was we had this client registration form that said, how did you hear about us today? And it was a blank, right? And so everyone just writes online.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, we're going to change that. It's going to be Facebook, Instagram, Google, Yelp, Nextdoor, like all the things. Then I had to create that in our practice management system as options. Mm-hmm. But then I had to ask them, hey, like this person didn't fill this out. Like, why didn't you gotta ask them. And they're like, we're not doing that. They're like, we got other things to do. And then I had to like really beg them, like, please make sure then when you're putting in all their information with your lobby full of people and dogs and the phone ringing off the hook,
yep.
I need you to select the drop down. Like, okay, they came in because of Nextdoor.
Yep.
But at least then I could run a report on it, right? And so I did. I bribed the hell out of them, and I was like, please do this for me.
Totally.
Because I want to know. And they would bring me the actual paper forms. This is before we went to digital in the COVID. I mean, we were already paperless practice, but our forms were still paper to fill out for new clients. But I actually asked them, right, for like, please let me have them so I could check the numbers and make sure it matched what was in our computer. But anyway, the point of that is that's a lot of work on literally everybody's plate. And at the end of the day, the owner of the practice was like, oh, okay, cool.
Exactly.
He was like, we got any from social? Okay, great. Like that was fine, right? So that's frustrating. But, I think that's the one that makes the most sense in veterinary people's brains. Yeah. But I, similarly have the same ROI conversation when people say, okay, I made a video that's an educational video, or I wrote this blog, or we posted this video on the website that's informational, but nobody likes it, right? Yeah. They always say they don't like it. And my immediate response is, well, what were the hits on that website? Because maybe they didn't engage with it on social, but did they go to the website and watch it? Because that's the goal. That's what you want them to do. And a lot of people have no idea of what that is. So I think but it requires using Google Analytics and like actually looking. That makes and I get it. Like you don't have time to do that. So I get it a lot of ways, but I think that the data is there. We just have to make a real commitment of time and energy on both sides to be able to find it. Totally. That was a very long answer.
I think that was a great answer. I don't think it's a simple one though. And
you should have had a beer and an hour for this conversation.
No, that's a really good response. And I think too, you have to know your numbers, and it's going to take time to figure that out, right? Like what's a client actually worth first visit, first year, and then lifetime, because those are different ways to measure that effectiveness. And so totally makes sense. Well, I'm so excited to hear that you have a book coming out. Can you tell me about that? Because that's it's just incredible and super exciting. We have to know about it. So everybody listening, you have to rush out and buy this, because it's going to change your practice. So tell us about your book that's coming out.
Thank you. You're very kind. I do have a book. It's called Social Media and Marketing for Veterinary Professionals, because I'm a huge nerd and couldn't come up with a better title.
That's a perfect title. Veterinary Marketing Podcast approved title.
There you go. Perfect. I just felt like there wasn't a solid resource, and maybe this is me being ultimate like nerd, but I don't want to say how old I am. I'm not that old, but I still want to go somewhere for a published resource of like, this is what you do, right? And here's some data. And I didn't feel like there was one place that compiled all of that for yours and my little niche of veterinary marketing. So I wanted it all in one spot. I also feel like I'm super action step oriented. So I wanted to write a book to say, okay, if you want to learn about Nextdoor or you want to learn about Instagram, okay, whatever you want to do, here's info about it, but then do these things. And so every chapter has action steps, like do this. So I hope that it will be helpful. And it was a definite labor of love for me to get it all together. And but yeah, it's done. It's out there, and I'm really excited about it. And I just hope it will be helpful to somebody if they're like trying to find information about doing something. They can actually find it.
That's so awesome. It's going to be really good. I think that is super needed and just a clear, concise way to get started, right? And
well, when they can't listen to podcast episodes and they just need to look it up. See, we'll combine the resources. It'll be great.
Well,
so
I suggest everybody go out and buy it ASAP. And you should definitely do an audiobook of it. That would be cool. Totally, though. But super cool. Well, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And who might be interested in getting some help? What kind of things do you offer for them? Just real quick.
Sure. So you can reach me on social at The Social DVM, or the website is thesocialdvm.com. I really love training, honestly. So, we do a lot of social media management for clinics and industry groups, but honestly, my favorite thing to do is to train somebody. My biggest passion project is we offer something called the Baby Bird program, where we spend several months together once a week, and we learn all the things. We make sure you have a solid foundation, and then you fly the nest because you hopefully know how to do it on your own now. And I get so much joy out of that. So if I can help, I'd love to.
That's an awesome program. That's really, really cool. Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of your knowledge. Congrats on the book. We'll be sure to plug it as much as possible because it's really, really cool. And awesome. I really appreciate you for coming on. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brandon. Always a treat.
All right, so I hope that was helpful for you. I know it was full of value. Head on over to Amazon and be sure to check out Dr. Dewilde's new book. And if you have any questions, comments, you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll talk to you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.